Well, hopefully, if we were in a physical background, I would say I hope you guys enjoyed the snacks that we have provided in the back of the room. And I'm so happy that everyone has come back. And so I now want to transition to talking about home buyer education and resources that are available to our clients around the country. Um, Next slide. When we were putting together our presentation, one of the things that we focused on, well, what are some of the challenges that we are experiencing as, I'm going to call us practitioners in the field? Now, this is not an exhaustive list, but these were the top 5 that we captured. And this is focused on home buyer education. How do we get some of the information that you heard from Vince and you heard from Kim and you've heard from Don to the masses? So hopefully you guys will feel deputized to now be able to spread and share this information with others so the word can get out about the various programs and services that are out there. So with that being said, one of our goals is to be able to realtors and lenders and builders about programs that are out there. We want to inform interested applicants of opportunities out there, not only to buy a home, but also to repair their home. We also want to educate our community leaders, inclusive of our elected officials. As we know, our elected officials typically change every 2 to 4 years unless there's a funeral. So we've got to have that continuous process of educating those that represent us at the city, state, and even on our federal levels of the programs that are available. We also want to partner with our land grant institutions in our respective states. For example, in Georgia, the 1862 institution is the University of Georgia, and the 1890 land grant institution is Fort Valley State University. Most states have at least an 1862, which means they were founded around 1862 as a land grant, and they typically have an extension program. So when you're looking at ways to educate your clients, feel free to reach out to your land grant institution or land grant university, that's what the U stands for, as a possible resource that you can use that will cost you absolutely nothing. And you also want to identify partners to provide technical assistance to first home time buyers to ease the application headache. And Vince shared with you guys earlier about the loan application packagers opportunity. Those would be great. There is a website that you can go to and find your state to see who the loan packagers are in your state, if you have any. I think when I looked through the list, there was several. Well, there was at least one for each state. Now, how close it is to you, I'm not sure. Um, and also consider taking advantage of that opportunity because there is a fee that you guys can earn as an additional revenue stream to package loans to make the home buying process just a little bit more comfortable for those first time home buyers. Next slide, please.
Hey, Joy, can you define what you mean when you say technical assistance for home buyers?
Sure. When I say technical assistance, that means one-on-one attention, maybe would be a good way of putting it, or developing programs specifically for your clients. For example, at Fort Valley State, back in 2003, when I was hired as the housing specialist, I was hired to provide technical assistance to low-income families, which meant that I would create a home buyer education program that I would offer there in Fort Valley, Peach County, Georgia, to citizens that were interested in buying homes. Later, that program turned into, we would travel to other counties and offer the same program, but it was a service that was provided typically at no cost to a community or organization to receive education on a specific topic, which in this case would be homebuyer education. So gaining access to homebuyer education. And I know that this topic is not specific to only Georgia, but it is very hard for us to find agencies that typically just provide home buyer education to those that are interested in becoming homeowners. And share that we have transitioned from the classroom setting to now that a lot of these classes are being offered online, like what do you call it? Like the University of Phoenix and Troy, they're all doing their education programming online. Now, homebuyer education is being offered online. I will not share my opinions versus online versus face to face, but I will share that homebuyer education is an important component of the mortgage process. An informed buyer makes a better buyer. So, how can we put things in place where our clients can receive printed materials or electronic information that they can read so that they can self educate? Because I don't know how many of those that identified themselves as homeowners actually found a class or found printed material that they read extensively before deciding to buy that home. But I think it's our responsibility as educators to make sure that that information is readily available in the communities that we serve. As I mentioned earlier, there's a limited availability of those traditional face-to-face homebuyer education classes. There's been an increase in the pop-up online homebuyer education courses. And one of the other issues that I've observed is that some folks offer a fee, sometimes almost $200, for people to participate in a first-time homebuyer education course, which becomes cost prohibitive to a lot of folks that are interested in buying a home. So if this is something that you're interested in, figure out ways that you can offer it without passing the cost off to the individuals that you're actually trying to benefit. Because I would hate for somebody to miss out because of a $200 price tag. Next slide, please. So I talked about HUD much earlier in my presentation, the United States Housing and Urban Development Authority. They have a very meaty website, but I took a screenshot because these are the tools that they put out there to help first-time homebuyers get either access to finding out housing counseling agencies in their state. They also have printed materials about how you can just self-educate yourself on the home buying process. Brenda asked a question earlier about assistance programs. They have a tab on that you can click on and find programs that are in your area. And they also have an area about owning and maintaining your home, which is a piece that many of us kind of overlook. I will share that I live in a house that is 115 years old. So maintenance is my middle name. And I don't mind doing it. I knew what I was doing when I got into it. But I think we talked about earlier, when you're transitioning from a rental situation to a homeowner situation, you kind of forget that you no longer have a landlord that you can call to say, you know, the air condition went out, or the stove is not working, or the refrigerator is not working. So I commend HUD for putting tools out there that folks can access if they have computers or cell phones that will allow them to self-educate. But if you are thinking about doing some type of training in your community, I would strongly encourage that you visit HUD's website and kind of pick and choose information that you would like to incorporate into your presentation from their website. Next slide. The other thing that I forgot to mention as I'm trying to stay on track is that for most mortgage products, home buyer education is required part of the mortgage process. So in addition to providing pay stubs and your last 2 or 3 years of income taxes and your shirt size and all that other kind of stuff, many of the programs that I'm referenced earlier require that you present them with a home buyer education certificate prior to closing. So if you have folks in your community that are in a bind, that they need to close, Fannie Mae, which I talked about earlier, has a homebuyer education online class, which will allow you to go through the process quite quickly. I think you can complete it in less than 3 hours. And at the end of the program, it's called Framework. You will print out your own certificate, and many lenders will accept that certificate as a requirement for closing. So do not feel that you have to go to a bricks and mortar traditional classroom in order to get that certificate. However, I do appreciate some of the extension programs that still offer the classroom face to face homebuyer education program, because many of them, they bring in the mortgage originator, they bring in the home inspector, they bring in the realtor, they bring in the insurance agent, and allow consumers to directly interact and interface with those professionals to get more detailed questions. Unfortunately, I know many of you have Apples and you talk to Siri. I don't know if Siri can answer these questions in the same level of detail, or even these online programs do not talk back to you. But that is an option if you need a certificate as you are going through the mortgage process and you need it for closing. Next slide, please. Freddie Mac also has a product called Credit Smart, and they have a 12 module curriculum which shows that that offers with no certificate. They have a tutorial which will offer a certificate. For our military families, they have a military financial readiness program. So we have military personnel that's really not too up to speed on what's out there for them. They have a course just for them. And then for those of you that are interested in going into the homebuyer education business, they have instructor resources which will allow you to self-design your own homebuyer education course to fit the needs of your community. So I wanted to highlight that. You can go to Freddie Mac's website, or you can just Google Credit Smart Courses, and this screen will come up and you just pick on the one that best suits your needs. Next slide. And the last homebuyer education resource that I found out there is offered by Genworth Mortgage. We do not have Genworth in the South, so I'm not quite sure of where their home base is, but as a smaller bank, they offer their own homebuyer education class. And the reason why I highlight this one, and you can access it, you can use it, it doesn't matter where you are. It's just like Fannie and Freddie Mae, Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac's programs. It will give you a certificate at the end. However, this is the only program that offers it in Spanish. So that is very commendable that Genworth saw the need to offer this in an additional language other than English. I have not found any other homebuyer education classes offered in any other language. But if you do have a Hispanic population, I would encourage you to look at the Genworth Mortgage website and share this with your Hispanic audiences, because this is also another barrier that keeps people from transitioning from the rental environment to the home ownership environment. So with that being said, Kim, do I have any questions in the chat box that I need to address before I transition over to Allison?
Let's see. So someone asked if the slides are going to be available afterwards, and they are. I was just actually checking. I think Framework might also have a Spanish version. I can double check on that.
Okay. Anything else, Kim, that I need to address?
I do not see. Let's see. Somebody has put a link about homebuyer resources in the chat about from the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. And yeah, so there are a lot of great resources, and I think you've done a good job of highlighting those, Joy.
And I will say that this is not an all-inclusive list, but for time purposes, I kind of highlighted some of the more popular ones. Right. So with that being said, I thank you for indulging me for almost the last hour, and I'm going to turn it over to the wonderful Allison Davis to talk about housing and planning. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you, Joy. I learned a ton, and I was engaged the entire time, so bravo. So we've talked about some of these issues that I'm going to highlight over the last 2 days. And the whole purpose of doing this training is to allow you all who are technical assistance providers, community leaders within your community to figure out how do you move your community forward in the discussion around housing. And the purpose was to try to identify what are the challenges associated with housing. And we broke it down in these themes of quantity, quality, affordability, and price, or I can't remember the fourth one was. I'll just make it up. We'll do planning. But the idea is that typically one or more of your housing challenges is going to fall within those buckets. So I wanted to, we're not ending the day, but I wanted to end the day of sort of providing information and food for thought before we go into that more of a planning discussion and talk about some of the higher level kind of housing discussion. And Joy and Vince and Don did a really nice job of talking about some of the details associated with those challenges, particularly around affordability and education. So what I just wanted to talk about was, you know, the importance of thinking outside of the house when we're discussing housing in a place. And we have talked about, I think, almost all of these throughout the last 2 days. But I think the purpose behind this discussion is that if you're working in a community and you're trying to propel them forward around housing issues, that you have to make sure that you've got the folks at the table who can represent different populations, who are leaders and can bring resources to the table around some of these issues. So when I was thinking about housing and community, I had certain issues I was considering. You know, we talked a lot yesterday about aging in place. Particularly in rural places, our senior community would like to stay in their home. And so what does that mean? And what are you thinking about when you say home? It's not just the physical structure of the home, it is how that home is situated in proximity to other amenities, family, services, etc. We talked yesterday about broadband a little bit. We didn't talk quite as much about physical infrastructure, water, wastewater. That is a very, very hot topic when we start thinking about development, housing development in rural places. Been a lot of discussion about out in rural places around cluster developments and what a cluster development would need in terms of infrastructure. And what that means in the short-term, long-term expenses, environmental conditions, and so forth. Proximity to amenities. One of the questions that we will often include in a survey of potential and current residents is, what's really important to you? And most often people are lamenting about the loss of their grocery store. And that's all they need. If they could just be close to a grocery store, then they can handle everything else. So what are those amenities that need to be considered? Proximity to jobs. We've talked a little bit about commuting. We'll talk a little bit more. Walkability. We won't talk much about this here, but there is a gentleman who does a lot of walkability trainings for rural places, and people in rural say, oh, we don't have a walkability issue. And he's like, just take a day, take an hour, and just sort of park your car on one of the major sort of two lane roads and count how many people are walking that you never really saw before, and see how dangerous it is. And I know when I'm driving through Appalachia with their windy roads, and he made that comment, every time I drive now, I'm very conscientious of how many folks are walking on that road and are very dangerous. So walkability both within their neighborhood as well as to services, jobs, schools, etc. And so what other community conditions do you all think are important? And I'm opening this up. What all are, if you're thinking about your community and you're thinking about the discussion around housing, what's important?
Allison, I was going to add about the walking thing. The other thing that I encourage people to look at is like what are called like desired paths, where there are like people are walking so frequently that it creates this path because there's a sidewalk there. And if you start paying attention to those different things, you can
Yes.
see.
And that's what, Oh,
Go
go
ahead.
ahead, Tim. I was going to say, so one of the things that someone I work with here will always say, don't create the sidewalk until you see the path, because you don't know the sidewalk that you're creating is in the right spot, but look to see where those muddy paths are, and that's where you need to put your infrastructure.
Exactly. Okay, someone said trails and recreation.
And that has become truly very, very important for attracting, new residents to a place. As these younger folks particularly really want to have quick and easy access to trails.
See, Brenda says different needs for different ages.
Perfect. Different ages, different individuals with disabilities, particularly in rural areas where those disability rates tend to be a little bit higher, whether it being ADA accessible, but really considering sort of meeting everyone where they are.
Let's see, Tyler said civic life, so clubs, service organizations.
Perfect.
That's a great one.
These are great ideas, right? So when you say these types of community issues and you're talking about how do we move housing forward, and that's important to you, then you need to make sure there's someone at the table representing that community factor. So let's just walk through a couple of these and then we can open up the discussion a little bit wider. So we've talked a lot about the elderly population. And I think right now, as we're going through COVID and people really are in isolation, this has become a really big issue. And I was at a large National Rural Health conference a year ago. And the gentleman who, I can't remember his name, really well known, he's a physician, and he said, the #1 killer of seniors is isolation. And that was really very compelling. And so this whole idea about, we know that based at least on the work that I've done, that seniors are pretty hesitant to think about moving into kind of those smaller communities in some of the rural places I've worked in, but there still has to be some way to connect. So we want folks who are, older to have familiarity of place. We want to have neighbors or friends who are nearby who can check in. We want to make sure that the homes are equipped for the elderly. I have already, I guess I'm really predicting an early aging moment for me. And I live in a 2-story house. There's no way to get a bedroom on the first floor. And my knees already creak as I'm going up the stairs. And so I found this product online. So I was like, well, I'm not gonna be able to get this wheelchair ramp thing that goes along the thing all the way up. And so I was like, what am I gonna do? And I started thinking about packing up everything. And then I found this product that this woman made that was like, it saved my life, because it's this pole that you put on your staircase railing and you can pull yourself up and you can kind of brace yourself down. Now, it's not the end all be all, but it would allow someone who is concerned about falling, it gives them this extra security. That's huge. I mean, I'm at the age of 45 and I'm like, what am I going to do? Imagine individuals who already are facing those issues and want to be in their home and don't have a home that can accommodate their needs. And of course, this is huge because we've got an aging population. This was just one way to highlight that, in fact, our population is aging. From 1900 to 2017, we're looking at those blue bars, and those blue bars are those who probably already need to make sure that we're taking care of their needs. The yellow bars are 45 to 64. Either folks are going to be thinking about moving or they're thinking about investing in their home so they can stay in place. So what do we do to accommodate these different populations? And then thinking about, the different needs of the aging population, 65 to 74 is still a pretty spry population. So it's the orange bars and particularly that yellow bar that we need to be very careful of. What are we doing for individuals who are over the age of 85? Their spouse is no longer alive. They live alone. What are we going to do? A lot of our rural communities don't have assisted living facilities. And so folks are really staying in their home longer than in urban areas. We talked yesterday about broadband. Let me see real fast if I talked about other infrastructure. Broadband was critical. It was certainly highlighted during COVID right now. Think about these families who are in places that don't have broadband, and how many of our states have said, well, we're going to go online for the fall semester. And so you've got students who are not going to be able to access their learning materials. The parents have options of maybe dropping them off at the school system if they're open for remote learning, extension office, you know, the library, but to be able to, that then disrupts the household and the ability for parents to do their work and so forth. So the idea of broadband is so critical, and it is now a you know, make or break decision. People are leaving if broadband is not available, or particularly if they don't see any broadband on the horizon. It's just that important of an amenity. And so what do you do in the short term if you don't have those broadband resources? And it's tricky because broadband's a huge investment, and the technology is changing so quickly that by the time you invest these millions of dollars in getting access, convincing a subscriber that you have the population density to make it worth their while, you know, we have a new technology. So and it takes years to get that. So what do we do in the meantime? And there have been some innovative solutions, but mostly it's about taking the student, taking the worker to a different location, or it's about, you know, doing some kind of hotspot lending program. So it's just a big, big issue. And so you don't want to start thinking about having folks developing out in, you know, where there's open space, where there is no access to broadband, because that's going to be a problem when you try to sell those properties. And we haven't talked at all about the ability for lower income folks to be able to afford it, even if it's available. So it's a utilization, it's an adoption, and it's an access issue. I'm not going to go through a lot of this. We have to all be familiar with the digital divide right now. You either have it or you don't. If you have it, you guys, everyone's doing well, but we're still pushing up against some limits in some areas. I had an entire conversation on Sunday night with my kids who are both grown, and they were both talking about broadband. One child owns a farm out in Eastern Kentucky. She uses her cell phone for Zoom calls, gets bumped off all the time. My son lives about 2 miles from me, and he was saying, can you believe I can't even stream Netflix? And I was like, yeah, I'm not 100% sure that's really the priority of folks right now, but I hear you. He asked me if I could write my congressman to complain on his behalf. And I was like, no, I'm going to pick a different priority, but it's still an issue. And there's all kinds of data, both good and bad, that's out there sort of describing what the condition is. The problem is that the data are so poor, but yet it's dictating some policy. And so there has to be some local ground truthing of where there is and isn't access to start convincing folks of the investment. And so I don't think anyone has to be convinced of why these rural amenities are important. They sometimes say, oh yeah, this is important, and they kind of sweep it under the rug. Like, once we have the housing, the amenities will occur. And I don't know how many of you work in community or work in economic development, where they say, once we have the jobs, the amenities will occur. Well, sometimes it's, you got to have the amenities for the jobs to occur. So, you know, you got to be working on both simultaneously. You're not going to have folks who have value amenities willing to make that move unless those amenities are at least on the horizon. And so that being able to convince folks who are making those decisions why those rural amenities are so essential. We can show that, you know, a high level of rural amenities is associated with growth, both population growth and job growth. There are a ton of stories that highlight being in close proximity to amenities actually has an implicit increase in your housing value. And it also attracts the creative class, right? We say the creative class is footloose and fancy. They are driven to where the amenities are. And as soon as either those amenities die or the amenities are greater somewhere else, they will continue on their way. And so that's one way to be able to attract that group of folks. One of the things I don't think I will talk about, but I think is really important, is this other infrastructure piece, the physical infrastructure that we have heard for so long. It's sort of the linchpin of economic development, the water, water and wastewater systems. And this has become, I mean, almost like a bunch of knockdown, drag out fights over, you know, the word lagoon. And you wouldn't think, oh, that sounds, I mean, it has caused just like a divide in lots of different communities as they start thinking about these cluster developments, which is a way to provide kind of that middle income housing, middle to higher end housing. And they put it out, you know, out in the community a bit. They do not have access to city or county water or wastewater. And so then the community has to figure out what they're going to do. And there are a couple of different solutions. A lot of our more rural places rely on lagoons. And so lagoons, people who actually have a lagoon system, everyone I've talked to has loved it. And everyone who's not been in that development has hated it. And it has just caused a really big deal. So there are some folks who do studies like cost of community services that try to compare sort of the revenue versus the costs of different types of development. And it's very expensive to get city or county water out to a place, particularly because the density is going to be so low. If you're talking about like a cluster development of 25 homes and you're talking about laying pipe, you know, out, you know, miles and miles, it just isn't going to pay. And so I have to be very, very thoughtful about what are you going to do? What are you going to do if you go beyond capacity? What's your expansion? What are your expansion efforts and so forth? The same kind of goes with water quality. Flint, Michigan was this big example of water quality issues. We hadn't really heard about it in rural places. In Eastern Kentucky, Martin County, Kentucky, which has made national headlines for just mismanagement of infrastructure, and not mismanagement, but just lack of investment and not paying attention to the priorities that were emerging. And with that, poor water quality, the place is dead and it will never reemerge. People will never move back to a place where there is a history of not showing investment in your infrastructure. It just is, it's just a real crying shame. So as much of I think of it as a boring topic and one that's been around for a century, it is still so absolutely critical. You have to have a quality, safe water, wastewater system in place. And the last thing I think I'm going to talk about and just do a couple is about commuting. We talked about this yesterday. To me, you know, quality of life, and particularly now that people have had the opportunity to have no commute, and they think, you know, this is actually pretty sweet. I don't have to get in the car. I don't have to drive an hour, spend an hour each day in a vehicle, and that's probably in a smaller place. The value of time might change considerably post-COVID. And so trying to minimize that commute time is pretty critical. And so if you see a lot of folks who are commuting out of your community, to me, that is a red flag. Unless they are a dual earner and one of their household members is working at home, that's a red flag. There is a real possibility that those folks are gonna, if the housing prices are doable, that they are a flight risk. And so to me, it's just sort of a risk factor that I tend to look at. And it's also the other way. You know, we just, the study that we did in Bourbon County, which is close to Lexington has a housing shortage. We have a manufactured urban service boundary, which says we're basically out of space for residential building. And so where are people going to go? And so if you have people who are commuting into this county, but they live in Fayette County where Lexington is, isn't that an opportunity to provide them a place to call home? They can have a beautiful home at a much more affordable price, probably with some land, minimize their commute. So what do you got to do to attract those folks moving into your community? So just sort of a low-hanging fruit to think about. We've talked a little bit about walkability. I know with some of the developments, the rural developments that I've been a part of, ensuring that the developer is considering walkability and incorporating a minimum amount of green space is critical, and you should not ever let a developer come in without that as a consideration. So you want to be connected within the community. And we can talk about this for any type of community. We can talk about teeny homes, we can talk about mobile homes, we can talk about giant homes. You want to have the sense of connectedness. And so that has to be considered before the houses are built. It's really hard post-built houses to figure that out. And then you want to make sure people can connect to what's valuable to them, whether it's to the school, to the trails, to their friends, to work. You know, do they bike to work? Do they walk to work? Do they drive to work? What does that look like? And there are all kinds of ways to do sort of walkability audits in your community to figure out if you have some obstacles. So the last thing I want to say is about land use planning. And at least in the places where I work, a lot of our housing decisions have emerged from the comprehensive land use that's required in places that have zoning. And so they have to do this comp plan, and they have to ensure, you know, it's huge. I mean, it's not a small effort, but housing typically will emerge as a need and a priority. And then of course, you know, the more rural you are, we've talked about this yesterday a bit, that tension between housing and a rural landscape is real, and it's ugly. I mean, I have seen people who just go at it. I mean, there are lawsuits, there's physical fist fights, there's all kinds of things that go on. And these are nice people, but some people are so passionate about preserving the rural landscape, and others believe that the community will die unless there's housing and there's jobs. And the truth is that both are really, really critical, right? You don't have jobs, and who's going to be there? You don't have rural landscape, who's going to want to be there? So this land use planning is just a critical part of thinking about what are the best practices. And so what we have found is that residential development emphasizes the importance of maintaining farmlands and ag activities. And so I don't know if any of you have been a part of sort of that land use discussion. Would you sit there with this giant map and you say, okay, here's where all of our different land uses across the spectrum, and it's all colored, and then you have to color in the future land use. And it gets very, very ugly when you say, this part right here, this purple part, that's where we're gonna put housing. People are like, oh, hell no, you're gonna put purple down here. Or why don't you put purple right in here? We do all kinds of like Lego exercises. I mean, anything to get people to just sort of visualize the impact of an irreversible decision. You know, another part of a land use goal is to minimize the visual impact of development. So you're protecting those more natural features. We want to have traditional community living. We want to have housing. We want to have employment, recreation. All those considerations are included. So with most of the land use plans that we do economic development, housing, transportation, health, ag and heritage. They're all separate components of the plan that take what seemed like 17 years to pull together. And the big thing right now is that, you know, we have been so focused on the single family home. And I'll just go back to that great image that Kim provided yesterday, where you had the single family home and you had the high rise. It doesn't have to be one or the other. There is a mix of housing that should be available that currently isn't available in at least many of our rural places to satisfy the needs of our different types of households. So I think I will stop there because I really want to focus on the bridge building activity. And Kim,
I have a couple of comments that they're two different things. Caitlin said that, talked about that urban communities are not immune to having broadband access issues, and that they had to give a third of the students in Des Moines had internet access to finish school. And I know that's been a problem here in Athens too. The neighborhood school in our up the street from where I live, only 10% of the kids were participating in online education. So yeah, so it's not just, that's not just a rural issue. And I think I've heard it really be talked about more. It's really becoming a utility, you know, like power that is so essential for our lives, and trying to figure out how to make that more accessible is a big deal. And then another, Brenda commented about kind of relative to the commuting discussion about when rents go up in a nearby urban county and people are pushed out, where affordable, and that's kind of that drive to qualify or drive, you know, affordability by driving issue that we talked about yesterday.
Yeah.
So
yeah, those are both really, really very valid and relevant, timely concerns right now. Yeah.
And one thing that I just wanted to share when you guys were talking about walkability, I don't know, I think I shared yesterday that I'm originally from Brooklyn, New York, and I now live in the South. Don't judge. But the biggest thing that I still cannot get used to are communities being built without sidewalks. And I don't understand how it happens. I know there's a financial ramification, major cost savings when there are no sidewalks. But I think about the parents that have to push their children in strollers. It's impossible unless you have a jogger, thingamabobber, which I'm not a jogger, so I never had one, pushing your stroller in the grass that's not maintained. So as you guys are being deputized with the information that we're sharing today, please, if you can, think about the parents with the strollers, or the kids just wanting to go outside and play. Why do they have to play in the middle of the street? But that's just my motherhood shout out. So I apologize. So Kim, are we ready to do this Lego?
Can I ask one question of the group? Are there other like hot topics that you guys are facing that we haven't touched on? I'm super interested because, you know, Kentucky's just one state.
Allison,
Thanks, Vince.
I think zoning is a hot one.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's kind of those communities that want it, but then there's a large population that says, you know, leave me alone. You know, I don't need any more government intervention. And, you know, I mean, zoning is a double-edged sword. It can do some things to make sure that properties are being maintained and everything, but there's a cost to it. So I think that's a struggle in many communities, and it might not only be rural. It could be, you know, a homeowners association that is very aggressive in their bylaws. So those are a couple of things I see.
I think zoning is a perfect example. We call the Z word, you know, folks just don't like, and just I'll give you two quick examples just in 1 week. One is what couldn't be, I wish I had gotten included in this, I should never have picked up my phone, is solar farming, which I don't know how many of you are dealing with that, but I should never have picked up the phone because solar farming to me is like the devil, because you feel like the worst person in the world and you're like, yeah, I can't get behind renewable energy, when that's not really the case, right? The case is you're using really high quality land that's in agriculture to produce, you know, electricity that's going outside of the community. So that is a huge zoning issue. And in fact, on Thursday, I was supposed to testify, and I was so thankful that our governor put in new restrictions so I don't have to do that now. The other one was that my husband, who also was against me on the solar farming, because you can create these great pollinator habitats. We got a letter sent home from our HOA because we had created a pollinator habitat. And apparently the neighborhood thought that our weeds were too high. And my husband, who is like the calmest person in the world, was like, oh, I don't think so. He showed up. He's like, so, I mean, just it brings out just the idea of the zoning, I mean, it brings out the bad side of people because they're so passionate about what they believe is important, and with, you know, good reason. So every one of these zoning issues has pros and cons. And I feel like people don't recognize that we all see there's some consequence of this. It's for a good reason, but there's a significant consequence. So thank you for bringing that, because now my blood pressure is high.
We've had also a comment about wind farms being kind of the same issue in Indiana. And then another comment that it's a struggle to explain that future development will not happen in rural areas without monetary intervention from the municipality, that small towns don't feel it's a responsibility to subsidize developers.
Yeah. I mean, it's just, you know, for me, if just like with broadband and with housing, if there was a market for it, the market would be there, right? And so if there was a market for this market rate housing that, you know, sometimes it just needs a little push. And same thing with broadband. There's got to be some way to at least begin with some type of subsidization, because it's just not there. That's, as an economist, it's, you know, it's, if it's there, it's there. If it's not, then there's a reason.
Kind of to your comment there, though, when you start looking at affordable housing and you start looking at a lot being 50, you know, a developed lot being 50,000, and to put an affordable house on there, you know, maybe you're talking another 150,000. Now you're at 200,000, and that's no profit for the developer. I think affordable housing is going to need a public-private partnership where, you know, maybe there's like a major employer that's trying to attract employees that are making $15, $20 an hour to their community, but the housing stock's very limited. But maybe they own a parcel of land that they are willing to work with the community to develop. So I'm not totally convinced that economically the market will decide. I think there's maybe has to be a public part.
Right, and I don't think the market decides, because the cost of the housing just isn't what people are able to pay, and so there's a mismatch there. And I agree. There have been some recent conversations with industry to say, if this is so important to you and having these jobs is so important to you, then you need to pony up and you need to provide some support for your workers. Yeah.
A lot of good discussion in the chat.
I know.
Here. So Amber saying, working in low income and homeless issues, there's a lot of pushback about how expensive it is to build HUD housing. And then once it's built, there are questions about how accessible it is after restrictions, and housing monopolies are big issues where she lives. And then Brenda says, if there's one community or county that does something around affordable housing, the neighboring counties are affected, and you might need regional coalitions. And I think that's to discuss and address that. And I think that is both good points, and especially the regional strategy pieces. I think something more rural places and smaller cities would benefit. The building, I'm familiar with HUD, but the cost of building HUD housing is outside of my wheelhouse. We have, I will say, on the public-private partnership in Georgia, our department offers a program. It's a technical assistance program for municipalities, and we accept 5 new communities, and it's a 3-year program. And once communities participate in that program, tax developers get an extra point on their application if they work with one of those communities. And that policy through the Housing Finance Agency in Georgia has been really effective at getting multifamily tax credit developments in rural communities in a way that I hadn't seen in other places that I've worked or conducted research with.
Well, what a great conversation. Okay, well, this is good because I think it'll kind of stimulate us into the how now brown cow.
Okay, here we go. Joy, do you want me to introduce the activity, or? Well, Joy is really the expert on this, but I'm really excited about this this tool. And so if we can go to the next slide. So this is an activity, facilitation activity that you can use with your community. It typically takes much longer, and it's ideally something that's done face-to-face with paper and markers and you know, maybe even drawing out your ideas. But it's a tool to help any group of people look at the gap between where you are now, the reality, and the ideal. And so we're going to go through a very short process. We're going to break up into groups and have so we're going to go and come back and go and come back, and we think that that's going to work. We practiced ahead of time. And so we're going to take a fictional problem, and well, it's probably not a fictional problem, but for this, it's a problem that we're going to focus on for this activity, and then sort of just test it out just so you can see how it might work. How's that?
Okay.
How'd I do, Joy?
You did good.
Okay.
So, thank you, Kim. So, you know, we've done a lot of talking at you, and we have made it to the end of this 2-day training, but we still wanted to give you a tool that you can take home and practice. You can practice this at your house, actually. But here is your scenario. Your group is made up of concerned residents in the Happy Place neighborhood. On one of the streets, drivers are constantly speeding, making it unsafe for pedestrians and cyclists. There are many children living along the street, and the traffic problems and parents in the neighborhood are—
There's a little typo there, I think.
There is, but we're just going to go with the flow. And so basically, you guys are going to be broken up into 3 groups. Hopefully you guys remember, if you want to take a screenshot with your phone, because you will not see the slide.
I just added it to the chat, so everyone should see that scenario in their chat box.
Catherine is amazing. And basically in your groups for about 3 minutes, you guys are going to talk about the now, which is the problem. And what are those problems? And then we're going to come back. So it shares on the next slide. Describe the current reality. In a face-to-face setting, you would encourage groups to use words, pictures, or symbols and record on a large sheet of paper. Now, on this large sheet of paper, you would use the left side of the sheet. Allison, if you'll go back 3 slides. Oh, I lied, right there. The now. We're starting on the now side of the bridge. So in this depiction here, if you had an artist in the group that can make a bridge like that, up underneath the word now, you can have a sheet of paper, and your folks could have Post-it notes, and they would write their now and post it up on the sheet of paper, and you guys would talk about it as a group. So Allison, if you'll go forward 2 more slides. So this is what you guys are going to do. You know what the issue is. So you guys can get as elaborate as you want to be in the 3 minutes that you guys will be hanging out with each other. But I need for one person to identify themselves as the writer or scribe, and they will be the same person that reports back out on the now. So we hopefully will have 3 spokespersons when we come back in about 3 minutes, and your facilitators cannot volunteer to be the writers or the scribes. So Catherine, if you'll send us to our breakout rooms. So we had 3 groups, right, Catherine? Wherever you are. There she is.
We had 5 groups, so each presenter had their own little group.
No wonder we were so intimate. So we were group 1, Tyler and Russ and Joy. We are number 1. So Tyler, what is some of the nows? And you have to unmute yourself.
Thank you for the reminder. I forget it does that when you come back from breakouts. But our nows were that people aren't feeling safe. They're thinking this is a dangerous situation. You've got angry residents out in the community, and it's really hurting just the life of the community, because who's going to want to go out and be on that street or be in community with people if folks are zooming by and going to knock you off?
Okay. Who is in group 2? Who is our spokesperson for group 2?
I don't know what numbers we are.
Yeah, I didn't pay attention to the numbers.
So group 2 is Kim.
That's my group? Okay, Vince or Brenda, do you want to share our?
Well, I guess we talked about trying to understand why people are speeding. If the speed limit doesn't match the location, you know, what's going on?
We imagined that maybe there weren't sidewalks. So in our fictitious, were not sidewalks. That was
Yeah, I
part
think
of
we
the
have two Brendas, but we're in agreement. We talked about the same thing, that there were no sidewalks. So it's a Brenda Long and a Brenda Maddox. So
Oh,
I think we were in different groups though. But that's fine. We did talk about those,
Created a Brenda
That's-
group.
that same noun, yeah.
Okay, who else wants to add to Tyler and Brenda's information?
He just said that it's clear that there are folks in the community who are not respectful. And that's just, they need to have some,
If they were residents, how you know they're not visitors?
well, then the visitors suck. The
Okay,
drivers are not respectful. And that if the kids aren't, if I was a parent in Happy Place, I wouldn't let my kids play outside. And so now I'm stopping them from enjoying the great outdoors and socializing.
and thanks to technology, they don't go out anyway. So, anywho, so is there anything else that you guys want to add to the now? We've got angry folks. We have discourteous drivers. Brenda Long shared that why are people speeding when there's possibly a posted speed limit sign? Maybe there is no sign.
Enjoy. Well, I would just add that there was, I don't think anybody mentioned there's not a place for the children to play, probably a safe place.
Okay,
So
we can add that. We can add that to Happy Place. Okay.
I said it can be anything we want. It's our story.
I would also like to say that Happy Place this is a one-way street. I'm putting that in there because I know what I want my solution to be. So
And is it a one-way street into a cul-de-sac as well?
no, it's just a one-way street on Main Street.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
So now that we brainstormed and the group has had an opportunity to contribute to the now, we're going to go back into our same group and work on the wow. Well, what is the wow? What do we want for Happy Place Main Street? We are not happy right now. There's speeding, there's safety issues, the sense of community, they're not feeling it. The kids possibly don't have a place to play. There's a safety issue. I think I mentioned folks are angry. So we're gonna go back into our groups and we're gonna brainstorm what is the ideal situation we want for Main Street? What do we wanna look like, let's just say maybe in a year? So Catherine, if you will send us back to our groups. So last time we heard from groups 1 and 2, even though folks didn't know their numbers. So let's hear some wows from groups that did not respond the last time. Whoever the leaders are from groups 3, 4, or 5.
Craig, do you want to do 3?
Yeah, I'm not sure I'm the leader, but I'm the note taker.
Okay. Same difference.
Well, our WOW kind of magic scenario that we said would require a lot of buy-in and money would be adding protected bike lanes on both sides and sidewalks. But we said that as an easier first step that might be a bit more plausible would just be to add more signage, maybe to add a radar that flashes if someone's speeding, or improves speed enforcement, talk to the local police, reducing the speed limit if it makes sense, add some crosswalks. If it's a rural downtown, maybe add some parking on both sides, so that's going to lead to people slowing down more naturally, and also more engagement in rural downtown businesses. Did I miss anything? I think that was generally it, Vince.
Like you covered it.
Good job, Craig. I'm giving you a hand smash. Boop. Okay, who else wants to go and earn a hand smash from me?
Michelle, do you want to report on our group?
Unmute yourself. Oh, there we go.
I just put her on the spot.
I muted. So our WOW, Group 3 has mentioned the bike lanes. We talked about that. We also shared in regards to having the kids have a say in what actually enforcement will actually take place. I really like that one.
Because it was her idea. It was
We talked about a speed table.
also Michelle's idea.
A speed table. I know I'm just writing off mine, but my group mate also mentioned that actually having a designated playground space for the kids to actually play. So that we have a designated space for them. And was there anything else, Miss Allison?
Well, we talked about rule following and having being able to, impose higher fines.
Higher fines for driving. Yeah.
Who's giving out these tickets? You, Allison? Officer Davis?
Yeah, totally.
Okay.
I'm all about that. I'm a super bossy person.
Good job, Michelle. Hand smash.
Let the kids have a say. I love it.
Okay, so we got one more group that hasn't reported out.
Well, okay, we talked last time. Brenda, you wanna? We got into a philosophical discussion about why don't people obey rules and how this relates to if you're gonna wear masks and how can we convince people to just do something that's good for somebody else? Why endanger the people of others? And
Well, and how to calm down residents who are angry. The parents who don't feel their kids are safe, the drivers who are driving too fast for the conditions in the neighborhood. So to recognize others for the greater good, not just themselves.
Okay.
Oh, God, I hope you can solve that.
Brenda and Don.
I can't wait to the next section because I'm looking forward to that solution.
Brenda Long and Don Albrecht has it all under control, so woohoo!
Thank goodness.
I thought it was interesting. It's hard. So having not done this before myself, it's hard to go to the WOW without thinking of like the solution. I think our inclination is to go to the solution, but thinking about that WOW might help. The ideal vision might help with some of those anger issues, or I think that finding like what is it we all agree upon in terms of a positive outcomes might help with that, and if you were doing this in real life.
And the other thing that I share is that this tool allows everyone to kind of have input. If you have a boisterous group with like me and Allison in it, Post-it notes might be the best thing to use because this activity can be done quietly. But for those of us that are bold, like Allison and Joy, we can, have people shouting out, anger, speed tables, kids have input, but that person who is scribing, which would be you, would have to be able to capture all of that. But it allows everybody in the group to have input. Everybody's voice is heard. And at this point, we have not excluded anything. Everybody's input carries the same amount of weight. And this is how you get buy-in, and this is how you can work towards consensus. So the last time you guys are going to be in groups, we're going to work on the how. And that is, there is something flying. How do we get from those angry residents, those, what issues, the safety concerns that we're perceiving, to this area where we have a park? I heard signage. I heard the speed table. In my group, we talked about shutting down the street, putting up bollards, and even doing a walkability study. Those are all done by Tyler because Team One rocks. So when you go back to your groups, think about, and Brenda, Long, and Don, I need for you to stay on task. We're not talking about masks. How are we
figure that out? In which case, go for it.
How are we going to get to the WOW based on the resources that we have? And remember, this is happy place. We're on Main Street, so our resources are endless, and everybody gets along in Happy Place. So I'm going to ask Catherine to break us up for this last time, and you guys are going to work on the how. So we are in the home stretch. Everybody survived. I'm going to do this real quick commercial announcement so I don't forget. Catherine is going to drop the evaluation link in the chat. Matter of fact, look like she just did it. So when we finish this discussion, if you don't mind, just go ahead and give us feedback on how you thought this 2-day session went. Feel free to be candid. We have thick skin.
I don't.
So hopefully in the 5 groups, everyone got along. The mask issue was solved by Don and Brenda. But the other 4 groups, what were some of the solutions that you guys brainstormed to get us from that now to that wow situation? And everybody can unmute themselves and just go for it. Kindergarten style.
So yeah, our group, we talked a lot about where all the money's gonna come from. So figuring out whose jurisdiction what is in and getting in touch with Department of Transportations or the local unit of government to figure out what the funds are and what the grants are and all of that. And then, yeah, talking to like Department of Transportation would be the great in to get the signage back up that has mysteriously gone disappearing. But
what else?
We shared about actually doing a charrette where everybody in the community can come together and actually share their ideas and actually what it would look like for them. I was sharing that we had kids that actually got engaged in our charrette and they drew pictures of what they wanted the community to look like. They should have that kind of voice. I had the exercise where you give a disability so that people can understand what it will feel like being in that community with everyone. So we talked about having a shopping cart, wheelchairs, strollers. What does that look like? So everyone can understand. And then also the education of speeding, the ramifications of speeding, having our police officers talk about that in the community so then that way people can really understand. And then our last highlight was, dun, 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 dun. Come on, Allison, what is it? Give the kids radar guns.
Yeah, giving kids radar guns, yeah. It's like, wait, I knew it was something really, really awesome.
I know, right?
We have unlimited resources and no behavior problems.
Yeah, we're gonna adopt that best practice. Give kids radar guns. Okay. What other groups had solutions to their nows?
We had a similar thing. It's encouraging parents to come to a Shrek kind of event and to bring their kids. And maybe bring elderly as well. Could be an elderly problem. But also maybe some people from, if it's a downtown business owners, as there's a trade-off with directing people maybe around the downtown as opposed to through downtown with, you don't want trucks running through downtown, but you also do want some traffic through downtown.
Okay. Anybody else want to share?
Yeah, we talked about just even sort of that process. We were talking in the earlier discussion about speed bumps or some kind of traffic calming, and that inevitably that would bring out, haters. And so like, how do you get to a point where, you know what the options are and people can kind of come to consensus, so that kind of discussing the options and getting kind of the first step seemed to be like getting residents on the same board. And then Brenda talked about the importance of talking to elected officials. And so we really focused more on the sort of setting the stage for bringing about change in terms of getting resident buy-in and using, talking to people in the city about what was possible and having an elected official serve as an advocate.
Okay.
Donna and I also talked about going back to what we learned about yesterday with collecting some data and assessing, is to try to measure how many cars were going through the street, how many were speeding, etc., to get some data to share.
Okay. So since we are at, Don, you're about to say something?
I just see I'm not always in left field. See that?
It's okay. You hit a home run, Don. I am proud. But the key thing about the hows is now that you have this list on this easel piece of paper, we're going to put some names by it. So Michelle, you're responsible for exploring the radar guns. Brenda, You're going to be responsible for what you talked about, but you cannot leave the room until all of the house have a person identified to be accountable for exploring that option. And when this group comes back together, your agenda is to report back out on those hows and the progress that has been made. So if Michelle does not come back with prices for these radar guns, Brenda, you did not meet with maybe the local community college to get data, we're going to hold you accountable. We're going to shoot you with the radar gun. It's just that simple. But this is how you use this tool. Hopefully this example kind of was enjoyable. We took a fictitious topic, but it still dealt with it. I mean, you can change it to anything, but it talks about funding, it talks about elected officials, and all that other kind of stuff that it takes to make changes in your community. So we're going to conclude. We are out of time. I have enjoyed serving as one of your moderators, and I'm not sure who I'm turning it back over to. Maybe it's Don.
And anybody else wants, I just want to tell everybody thanks. I've enjoyed interacting with you. I appreciate your input. I want to again thank the team that put this together. They're a great bunch of people to work with. I enjoyed it. And good luck to all of you. And like I said before, I've said again, please, if we can be of any help, let us know. You have our contact information, and we would love to be of assistance to you as you go forward. So thank you.